This video was brought to you by Shudder, your one-stop shop streaming service for all of the best in horror, suspense, and thriller content that film and TV has to offer. Get your extended 30-day free trial by following the link in the description and entering in the promo code FILMRADAR. John Carpenter's The Thing was initially met with less than an enthusiastic response, but in the years since its release, it has seen a shifting of the tides as far as its reception, where now it is widely considered to be one of the most significant achievements in the sci-fi horror genre that has gone on to inspire many other phenomenal works in their own right, from films like It Follows all the way to The Hateful Eight. But before we get into what makes The Thing such an effective work of horror fiction, let's start by discussing the nature of fear itself. Now, I am by no means an expert on neuroscience, and there are many more in-depth sources than this video if you're looking to learn more on the subject, but basically our senses work together to navigate the world around us, with each part of the brain serving a different function. Fear is primarily processed through the amygdala, its practical function being that if we perceive a threat, the amygdala integrates that data and triggers what is most commonly referred to as the fight or flight response, a spike in adrenaline, activation of the sweat glands, increased heart rate, and so on, in preparation to respond to the perceived threat. The ability to recognize potential dangers and respond accordingly is a key component to our survival, and whether these fears are learned through sociocultural norms or genetics, we're not entirely sure just yet, but it is clear that fears can be inherited one way or the other. It's how someone may develop a fear of sharks despite never actually encountering one. Most people have a combination of both rational and irrational fears. An example of a rational fear is being afraid of bodily mutilation, and an example of an irrational fear, otherwise known as a phobia, would be a fear of spiders. Classified as an irrational fear because even though most spiders are venomous, very few actually have the potential to cause us harm. It's worth noting that another key component often found within horror is the feeling of revulsion. Primarily processed through the insula, its practical function is to ensure that we avoid potential contaminants that may signify disease, by covering our mouths or pinching our noses, and maintaining a safe distance to ensure our protection. Movies have gotten particularly good at manipulating our emotions. They hijack our neural pathways that trigger the release of certain chemicals to make us laugh or to make us cry, because on a primal level, our brains can't tell the difference between cinema and reality. So by extension, a good horror film knows how to incite feelings of fear or disgust to effectively trick our brains into thinking that we're in danger. But what triggers a fear or revulsion response changes from person to person, so I think that what makes John Carpenter's The Thing such a fantastic horror film is how it exploits many fears, both rational and irrational, to create a sense of dread and a constant building tension that escalates as the dangers these characters face become increasingly worse, capitalizing on some of the most fundamental fears built into us from millions of years of evolution, as well as some of the more common phobias to ensure that just about anyone watching the film will find something to be scared of. Humans have learned to develop a healthy fear of a harsh climate to help ensure our survival, and the setting of The Thing is one of the most inhospitable places in the world, a sprawling frozen desert that is on average the coldest and driest and windiest place on Earth, with average temperatures reaching negative 81 degrees Fahrenheit during its coldest months. Antarctica is populated almost entirely by scientific researchers. During the winter season, only around 1,000 people can be found on the entire continent, compared to the nearly 25 million people who live in Australia, a continent roughly half the same size. In the film, we see the remnants of a research outpost that we learn is only a quote-unquote short haul away at
an hour there, an hour back.
The nearest potential human contact is an hour away, by helicopter, mind you, and of course we quickly learn that they won't exactly be of much help anyways. Due to the fact that the conditions outside are too extreme for prolonged exposure, the crew are mostly confined within the research compound, with its tight corridors and low ceilings. The defining characteristic of claustrophobia isn't necessarily the size of the space, though that often plays a role, it's more of a fear of being trapped. And given the nature of their surroundings previously discussed, as well as their failed attempts at radioing for help, they might as well be trapped on a deserted island or a derelict spaceship with no way out. Even before the characters are fully aware of the gravity of the situation, the paranoia is already starting to set in. First because of the attack from the Norwegian scientists, but after bringing back the deformed corpse that they find at their destroyed outpost, the paranoia really starts to take hold. It's an emotion that is categorized as an instinct created by feelings of anxiety that stems from the anticipation of fear. Basically, fear is the confrontation of a perceived threat. Anxiety is the unshakable feeling that one will soon find themselves confronted by a perceived threat, and paranoia is the instinct that these perceived threats are all around us, with those who we might otherwise call friends acting as co-conspirators who seek to cause us harm. The point of which being that even without the shape-shifting alien bent on assimilating all organic life within reach, the cards are already stacked against them. Everything and everyone is a potential threat, and with their mental states in such chaotic disarray from the climate, the isolation, the claustrophobia and paranoia, the tension and fear permeates every inch of the frame. Trying to act rationally under such duress is a near impossible task and acts as the perfect foundation for what's about to happen. The first time we see the thing proper is after it's put into the kennel and begins its transformation, and what makes this such an excellent scene of horror is that it's working on so many different levels. Whether you love or adamantly fear dogs, this is an inarguably horrible sight, violently morphing into new forms by mutilating itself, covered in blood and slime, with characteristics that resemble dogs, spiders, snakes, and insects all at the same time, and all of which are some of the most common phobias or triggers of disgust, certainly when mashed together in such a gruesome and unnatural way. As I mentioned earlier, we as humans have built-in triggers to avoid danger, fear typically helping us to avoid threat of bodily harm, with disgust or revulsion often preventing us from eating or breathing in something that will make us sick. And in just one scene, almost every single survival instinct is being exploited simultaneously. Though there is such a thing as exposure therapy when it comes to fear, wherein fears can be overcome by conditioning the brain through repetition of interaction with whatever stimuli would trigger the fear response, lessening the intensity of that fear through increased exposure. But by the nature of the thing itself, it never assumes the same form twice, so you never really get used to what you're seeing, intensifying those same emotions of fear and revulsion each time it's depicted. And when revulsion and fear are combined, that's when we feel a true sense of horror, because they are creating conflicting responses in the brain. Fear triggers the fight or flight response, but where do you run to when the perceived threat is inside your only shelter? And how do you fight it when killing it risks spreading a potential contaminant? These are almost entirely autonomic responses in the brain, a process that happens without our having to think about it, so we can react as quickly as we need to survive the encounter. But when confronted with true horror, we may wind up stuck, frozen to the spot, mouth agape, completely paralyzed by fear. The Thing is a masterpiece of the horror genre because it takes advantage of nearly every primal fear that we humans have, a cosmic and unknowable, uncaring force exerting its will upon us, able to take the form and even personality of any organic life form by infecting it and slowly transforming it from the inside or assimilating it through other means, often assuming the form of some Frankenstein-esque monstrosity that has our human traits mixed with some of the most reviled creatures on Earth. All the while, the main characters are trapped within the tight confines of a research compound in the middle of an Arctic desert, sleep-deprived and paranoid, surrounded on all sides by those who may already have been imitated, never knowing who you can fully trust, including yourself. It presents a constant onslaught of danger of both internal and external sources, where any one component would make for an interesting film in its own right, like how It Follows borrows the same shape-shifting concept, or how The Hateful Eight uses the same sort of setting with the claustrophobia and paranoia that comes with it. And like all great stories, it has an adaptability that has allowed it to maintain relevance even 30 years after its release. It can be seen as an exploration of xenophobia, or a metaphor for the AIDS crisis, or Cold War spies, or in a broader sense, the breakdown of trust within any community. Like The Thing itself, the film can take on the shape of anything your imagination can conjure up, and adapt to its surroundings to survive an ever-changing socio-cultural landscape. Its concept allows for infinite interpretations and opportunities for retelling because its plot is deceptively simple, and it will likely continue to scare new audiences well into the future because of its creature designs that incite fear in almost anyone. Normally they say that the most effective horror is best left to the imagination, but this may well be the one film where that isn't the case. Thank you to Shudder for sponsoring this video. Shudder is the ultimate destination for horror, for suspense, and for thrillers. They've got a wide collection that spans every genre and subgenre within, with some of the biggest names in the business, including John Carpenter, with 3 of his classics available for streaming right now, as well as an extensive list of films and TV that you won't find anywhere else, like the horror anthology series Channel Zero that's based on popular internet creepypastas. The first season is available to stream right now, with the second season arriving in September. Normally they offer a free 7-day trial, but viewers of this video will get an extended 30-day free trial by using the promo code FILMRADAR. With Halloween fast approaching, you can get into the spirit with films like The Evil Dead, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or catch a glimpse at some of Rob Bottin's incredible makeup work in The Howling. Again, follow the link in the description and enter the promo code FILMRADAR to get your extended 30-day free trial of Shudder. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. The Thing is one of my favorite movies of all time, certainly one of my favorite horror films, and even though I haven't covered horror before on this channel, it's actually probably my favorite genre of film, and I've just always kind of enjoyed anything like Halloween associated. So if you have any suggestions for me, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to take a look at those. Again, just wanted to say thank you to Shudder for sponsoring this video, and a huge thank you to my patrons for helping to keep this channel going. Even as little as $1 a month actually makes a big difference, and so if you enjoy the content that I make, I would really appreciate you considering to support me on Patreon. But anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.